Okay, so get this. Prime Minister Trudeau is resigning, but also we have former President Trump suggesting Canada just become the 51st state.
Wow.
All in the same week. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Today we're looking at a Fox News article that breaks down Trump's reaction to this whole thing.
Okay.
And, well, let's just say it's gotten a lot of attention. It's got people talking.
Definitely. The timing here is pretty interesting. I think it's raising eyebrows.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
For sure.
I mean, there's just a lot to unpack here. I mean, from the factors that led to Trudeau resigning to even thinking about what would happen if this merger actually, came to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So much to unpack. So let's just kind of dive right in.
Okay.
First up, Trudeau's resignation. So he announced that he's stepping down.
Right.
From being Prime Minister A&D as the leader of the Liberal Party, he wants a robust, nationwide competitive process to find his successor. Wow. But, what I'm curious about is, what really pushed him to make this decision?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, one thing to consider is that Trudeau has been in the spotlight for almost a decade.
Right.
And, it hasn't exactly been easy these last few years.
Right.
He's had to deal with, declining approval ratings, largely because of the rising cost of living and inflation. It puts a lot of pressure on a leader.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like that pressure wasn't just coming from the public either.
Oh, absolutely not. There were growing calls for his resignation, even from within the Liberal Party itself.
Wow.
And then, of course, the opposition, they were really turning up the heat.
I bet. Especially after Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland resigned.
Oh, yeah.
Very publicly. And that letter, it was pretty scathing.
He was.
She criticized Trudeau's economic policies, but also his handling of Trump's, let's just say Trump's bold suggestions for Canada.
Yeah, safe to say. I think Freeland's departure, it was a major blow to Trudeau's government. It definitely made it seem like things weren't going well.
Right.
And it probably, really played a part in his decision to step down.
Probably.
Yeah.
All right, well, now on to the elephant in the room, or I guess, should I say moose in the room?
Right.
Trump's proposition for Canada to merge with the U.S. So this isn't just like a random tweet he made, right?
Yeah.
He's been pretty consistent on this.
Oh, yeah. This isn't the first time he's brought up this whole, Canada becoming the 51st state.
Yeah.
He's mentioned it quite a few times on different platforms. Even recently on Truth Social, he posted about it again.
Huh. So what exactly is his reasoning?
Well, his main argument is that, there would be economic benefits.
Okay.
He says that if they merged, it would get rid of tariffs,
Okay.
which would lead to lower taxes and also more trade between the two countries. But he also brought up security benefits,
Okay.
saying that Canada would be better protected from threats. Threats from places like Russia and China,
Gotcha.
if, they were under the U.S.'s protection.
So he's basically painting this as a win-win
That's the story he's going with.
for both nations.
Yeah. But of course, it's way more complicated than that.
Right.
You can imagine, right?
Yeah.
Before we jump to any conclusions, we need to take a closer look at what would actually happen if this merger were to happen. We're talking about their political systems, their economies, social programs, even just their cultures and how they see themselves.
Right.
It would affect both sides.
It's a lot. And speaking of complicated, didn't Trump actually bring this merger idea up to Trudeau in person?
He did. They met at Mar-a-Lago late last year.
Oh, wow.
What's really interesting is that Trudeau's visit wasn't even announced beforehand. It wasn't on the books.
Oh, wow.
It happened after Trump threatened to put a 25% tariff on Canadian products.
Oh, so it sounds like Trudeau was just trying to, smooth things over and avoid a trade war.
That seems to be the general idea, yeah. But I think it's pretty telling that Trump brought up the merger idea during that meeting, during such a tense meeting.
Right.
It says something about his intentions.
Definitely. Okay, so we've laid out the backstory. Trudeau's out, Trump wants a merger, and the world is watching. So now let's get to the heart of it all. Is this merger even possible?
Right.
And what would it mean for both countries if it did happen?
No, that's where it gets really interesting, because a merger this big would have huge consequences for everybody involved. It's not just about, changing lines on a map.
Right.
You're talking about combining two different countries that have their own history, their own cultures, their own governments.
Yeah, for sure. So before we get into all of that, let's hear from you.
Yes.
What are your first thoughts about this whole proposal? What benefits can you think of?
Right.
Or challenges?
What comes to mind when you imagine the U.S. and Canada becoming one country.
Think about that, and we'll be back in a moment to talk about it.
You know, when thinking about this merger, it's really important to remember the history between Canada and the U.S.
Yeah.
They've always had this weird dynamic, you know?
Yeah.
They're neighbors, allies, trading partners. But then at times, there's also been competition.
Right.
And even, some friction between them.
Yeah, it's like siblings.
Yes.
That are close, but always competing for attention.
Exactly. Like, we've seen them working together, closely, like with NORAD and defense. But then they also disagree on trade and the environment, like the softwood lumber thing that's been going on forever.
Yeah. So with all that history, how would merging even work?
Well, it would completely change North American politics.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to combine two completely different types of government.
Right.
Would Canada just switch to the U.S. system?
Right.
Or would it be some kind of mix?
Yeah.
And how would the Canadian provinces be represented if they were in the U.S. Congress?
Oh.
It's a lot to think about.
It really is. And we can't forget about the money part of it all.
The economics, yeah.
Yeah, Trump is saying no more tariffs would be good for both economies.
Right.
And it sounds good on the surface.
Yeah.
But how would you even combine two completely different economies?
Right. I mean, what would happen to, things like universal health care in Canada?
Yeah.
That's funded so differently from how it is in the U.S.
Right. Would Canadians even be okay with giving that up?
Right.
And then what about the Canadian businesses that might not be able to keep up?
Right.
If they had to compete with these huge U.S. companies.
Exactly. It's a big deal.
Yeah. And beyond all that, there's also the whole culture thing.
Yes.
Canada has its own distinct identity.
Absolutely.
That's separate from the U.S.
Yes.
So merging could bring up all these issues about language, values,
Yeah.
Even keeping their culture intact.
Exactly. And, Trump has said that a lot of Canadians want to be the 51st state. But is that really true?
Right.
We need to think critically about that.
Yeah.
And look at the evidence. What do polls in Canada show?
Right.
What are Canadian experts saying?
Right.
Professors, journalists about what might happen.
Right. It's easy to find people who are really for or against this.
It is.
But we have to go deeper.
Yeah.
Look at the nuances and consider people's motivations.
Right. Are those who want the merger just thinking about the money?
Right.
Or is it something deeper?
Yeah.
Do they think there should be one big North American identity?
And on the other side, what about the people who don't want this?
Right.
What are they worried about?
Right. Are they worried about Canada losing its independence?
Yeah.
Are they worried about what will happen to social programs? Or do they just not trust Trump's reasons for wanting this?
Right.
All of these are really important questions.
They are.
And it's important to look at all the different opinions out there and not make sweeping judgments.
Right. And that's where you, our listener, come in.
Exactly.
We've given you a lot to think about.
We have.
But what stands out to you?
Yeah. What resonates with you?
What do you think about this whole thing?
Right.
We want you to really think critically about what you've heard.
Yes.
Do your own research.
Look at different perspectives.
Yeah.
And form your own opinion.
Yeah. Now, let's zoom out a bit.
Okay.
And look beyond just Canada and the U.S.
Right.
What does this merger mean for the rest of the world?
It really raises questions about what will happen to North America as a whole and its place in the world.
Yeah.
How would merging affect relationships with other countries?
Right.
Would it make North America stronger on the world stage?
Right.
Or would it create new problems and alliances?
It's a lot to think about.
It is. It's fascinating to think about all the possible outcomes.
Yeah, would it change global trade?
Right.
Would it affect immigration? Would it change how countries work together on things like climate change?
Yes.
Or global security?
I mean, it could shift who has power in the world.
Yeah.
And that's something we have to think carefully about.
Definitely. So we've covered a lot.
We have.
The politics, the economics, the global impact.
Yeah.
But before we finish up, we need to talk about one more thing.
Right.
How this could affect people's everyday lives. We've talked about the big stuff,
right.
Politics, the economy, what it could mean for the world. But this merger could really change things for everyday people.
Exactly. It's easy to focus on the big picture.
Yeah.
But we have to remember that real people will be affected by this.
Right. Imagine someone living in Toronto or Vancouver.
Right.
How would their lives change?
Yeah. Would they have to deal with a whole new government?
Right.
Different social programs? Would their culture even change?
And what about people who want to move between the two countries?
Right.
Would it be as easy as it is now?
Yeah, would there be new rules, restrictions?
It's really interesting to think about all the stories that would come out of this
Yeah.
if this merger really happened.
Right, like what about families with relatives on both sides of the border?
Yeah.
What would that be like for them?
And would businesses have to change how they work?
Right.
Would schools have to change?
It's a lot to think about.
It is. And while we can't know for sure what will happen,
Right.
it's important to remember that this isn't just about politics and money.
Right.
It's about people's lives.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
we want to leave you with one last question to think about.
Okay.
How could this change in North America affect your life?
Right. Even if you don't live in Canada or the U.S.
It's something to think about.
It is, because we live in a world where everything is connected.
Yeah,
And changes in one place can affect the whole world.
definitely. Maybe this makes you think about what borders even mean,
Right.
or what it means to be part of a country in today's world.
Exactly. Maybe it makes you want to learn more about Canada and the U.S. And their history together.
Or maybe it just reminds you how important it is to stay informed
Yes.
and really think about these big issues that are shaping our world.
Because the world is always changing.
Yeah,
And we need to be able to think critically and engage with what's happening.
well, we hope this deep dive gave you some insight
Yes.
and made you want to learn more.
And as always,
Yeah,
keep exploring, keep asking questions, and form your own opinions.
and with that, we'll leave you to think about all the possibilities.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
See you next time.
Until next time.